The US president is assassinated, but not in the White House. It happens in an underground city after the end. Instead of reporting it, the bodyguard keeps it hush-hush and locked down the presidential residence. The first episode of the new TV show Paradise is full of twists and turns, with an ending that'll knock your socks off. Xavier Collins lives in this picture-perfect city that looks like it's straight out of a fairy tale, but with a weird vibe. He's the head of the president's security detail, built like a tank and always on high alert. During his morning jog, he swings by the presidential pad. His colleague Billy's on guard duty and reports that last night was quiet. Billy's got a bad case of the runs, so he need duck out early. He's got Jane covering for him. Xavier's a single dad with 2 kids. His son James is chowing down on breakfast, talking about this cool book he's reading, James and the Giant Peach. Collins suddenly gets all quiet and broody. When Xavier gets back to the presidential digs, Jane's taken over guard duty. The agents inside report that the president hit the hay at 10 p.m. and still hasn't surfaced. Xavier's a bit puzzled. The president's not one to sleep in. He knocks on the bedroom door and calls out, but gets zilch. When he pushes the door open, Xavier's shocked to find the president lying in a pool of blood. His mind flashes back to the morning after the president's re-election. The president, all smiles and jokes, made a great first impression on Xavier. He was cool with protecting this down-to-earth leader for the next 4 years. The president, sounding sincere, says he's a straight shooter who just wants to do right by the country. He asks Xavier to have his back, even if it means taking a bullet. Xavier proves he's all in when, at a press conference, a fake reporter pulls a gun from a mic. Xavier jumps in without hesitation, taking a bullet for the president. After that, they get a bit closer.
Saying thank you feels kind of insufficient.
Saying just doing my job seems kind of lame.
So we'll just leave it there, huh?
Back in the present, Xavier checks out the crime scene. Empty glasses, an open record player, 2 glasses of unfinished wine, a cigarette pack, and a pair of earrings. Following the blood trail to the balcony, there is a half-smoked stick cigarette. The safe's open with an empty black box in front of it. Xavier, who didn't even flinch at seeing the dead president, starts to panic. Instead of reporting it, he gives Jane an order.
Jane, I need you to quietly lock this place down for the next 30 minutes without asking any more questions.
Xavier calls Billy, who's still on the Jarn, cause he was on duty last night. When Xavier drops their emergency code, Billy knows something's gone south.
Again, it's about 30 minutes before Jane has to call it in, but when she does, Robinson won't let me within a mile of this place. It's really bad, and I need you here 5 minutes ago. Billy, you step into this thing with me, you could be entering a world of hurt. Promise. 5 minutes ago. Move.
Jane's itching to know what's up, but Xavier keeps her in the dark. He heads to the security room to check last night's footage with Garcia. They see the president having a spat with his wife, then getting cozy with another woman. Xavier notices her earrings match the ones in the president's room. The president has a couple of drinks with his dad, then heads back to his room with a third. The last person to see the president is Xavier. At 10 p.m., they have a quick chat before Xavier closes the bedroom door and leaves. Everything seems normal, but something's off to Xavier. When Billy shows up, Xavier takes him to check out the safe. The killer clearly knows the layout of the residence and has some serious access. He sends Billy to scope out the balcony area.
No photos, no notes. Mental snapshots of everything. It's the little things. Little things gonna matter here, Billy. Copy?
Copy.
Go.
In the garden below, Billy finds some trampled plants and muddy footprints on the path. Meanwhile, Garcia calls Xavier back to the security room with a new lead. After Xavier and Billy switch shifts, the footage shows Billy drinking Garcia's soup from the fridge and taking a 90-minute nap on the couch. Interestingly, the TV next to him shows a frozen image for a while. Garcia discovers that all cameras were offline from 10:42 p.m. to 12 a.m., explaining the frozen image. Billy, who was asleep, didn't notice. The cameras come back online at 12 a.m., and Billy wakes up a minute later. Garcia starts his shift after 1 a.m., so no one knows what went down during that hour and a half. There's some kind of vibe between Billy and Jane, but they're keeping it on the down low. Xavier tells Jane to report the president's death to the higher-ups. Soon, another team of agents takes over security at the residence. Xavier, being the last one to see the president alive, becomes the prime suspect. Enter Agent Robinson, the woman who was getting cozy with the president last night and the owner of those earrings.
I was wondering where you were, Agent Robinson.
Oh, I'm right here, Agent Collins.
She grills Xavier about his chat with the president in the bedroom. Xavier flashes back to last night. The tipsy president invites Xavier to stay for some music and a nightcap, but Xavier politely declines. The president then pulls out a black box from the safe, saying it contains the news of world, but Xavier stays mum. The president goes to the balcony for a smoke and asks if Xavier can forgive him for something he did in the past. Xavier gets emotional, talking about how his pregnant wife loved James and the giant peach and named their son after it. His voice shakes and his eyes water.
You want to know if I'll forgive you? I'll forgive you when I can sleep again. And I'll sleep again when you're dead.
Clearly, some decision the president made cost Xavier his wife, leaving his kids without a mom, and Xavier can't forgive him for it. Since Xavier wasn't at the residence last night, he's temporarily off the suspect list. Xavier takes off running through the streets. As the camera pans, things start to look weird. People use wristbands to unlock cars and buy stuff, and the ducks in the river are actually electric models. Even weirder, the whole river is fake. It's not even deep enough to cover someone's shoes. Xavier stops and pulls out the cigarette pack from the president's room, which has an X drawn in blood on the back. There's one cigarette left with a string of numbers on it. A nearby electronic billboard announces that tomorrow's sunrise will be delayed by 2 hours. Xavier's mind drifts back to a few years ago when the president, trusting him, let him in on a top secret known only to about 100 people worldwide to save humanity from an extinction-level disaster. The US bigwigs built a massive underground city beneath the Colorado mountains, the only place people could survive in the future. Xavier looks up at the sky. As the camera pans out, we see that the blue sky and clouds are just a giant screen, and the sun is just a super bright heat lamp. It's clear now that here is the underground city, with maintenance crews working outside the sealed space. And in this closed-off world, the president has been murdered. What secrets were in that stolen black box? What turned Xavier against the president? We'll have to tune in to future episodes to unravel these mysteries. To dodge the coming apocalypse, America's big shots team up with some loaded billionaires for one last Hail Mary. They build this massive underground city under the Colorado Rockies. They call this Survival Bunker Paradise, and it's bigger than anything humans have ever built before. The blue sky and fluffy clouds, just a giant screen. That blazing sun, a huge spotlight. The weather's all fake, controlled by humans. Paradise has got it all. Shopping districts, cultural spots, schools. It's like they Xeroxed a whole city and stuck it underground. The ecosystem's run by some seriously high-tech gear, and machines do all the heavy lifting when it comes to making stuff. Everyone in Paradise wears these special wristbands for everything. Buying stuff, unlocking cars, you name it. With life so cushy and convenient, crime's pretty much non-existent. They've never had a single murder until now, 3 years in, when the president gets offed in his own pad. The killer also swipes a tablet from the safe, which probably holds all the juicy secrets and conspiracies behind Paradise. Picking up where we left off, Xavier can't stop obsessing over the numbers on that cigarette he snagged from the crime scene. He's tried every angle, but he can't crack what the president was trying to tell him. He dreams about the moment Doomsday hit, when he was on the phone with his wife and didn't even get to say goodbye. He wakes up to find his buddy Billy watching the kids, and his boss Robinson's been waiting for him.
Agent Collins, I'm gonna need you to come with me.
Robinson says they've hit a wall with the investigation, no leads whatsoever. Xavier's still eyeing Robinson as a suspect, given her bedroom romp with the president the night before. Robinson gets all fired up, insisting she really cared about the president and is dead set on finding the killer. Then she drops a bomb. The bigwigs are pissed about the missing tablet from that black box. So today, they're grilling Xavier, the first one on the crime scene. In the interrogation room, they hook Xavier up to a lie detector. Robinson's running the show, while two women watch from next door. One of them, Samantha, was at the crime scene yesterday. From how everyone's treating her, it's clear she's a big deal. When Robinson asks if Xavier took anything from the scene, he takes a deep breath to steady his heartbeat.
No.
He fools the lie detector. Keeping mum about the cigarette pack he pocketed, Samantha looks a bit let down. She's clearly itching to find that tablet. Robinson then asks why Xavier kept the president's death under wraps for 30 minutes. Xavier cranks up the volume and starts mocking Robinson.
I didn't feel comfortable going through normal channels because my boss was sleeping with the president and he was laying there on the floor dead. You all know she was sleeping with him, right?
Getting her dirty laundry aired out in public throws Robinson off her game. Samantha can see Robinson's losing this battle. Xavier's turned the tables on her, so she sends the other woman in to take over. Robinson slinks out, looking pretty ticked off. Xavier recognizes the new interrogator as Torabi, the president's shrink, who once did a session with him too. She asks a weird, uncomfortable question.
Is a part of you happy that Cal is dead?
While Xavier's hemming and hawing over how to answer, Torabi secretly shows him her palm.
Yes.
Torabi tells Samantha that Xavier is probably telling the truth, arguing that good liars don't admit to hating a murder victim. This seems to clear Xavier in Samantha's eyes, and she even gives him 2 weeks off. But Xavier's still wary of Samantha. Even the president seemed to dance to her tune. She's likely the real puppet master of paradise. When Samantha hears about Xavier's 2 kids, she gets a sad look in her eyes. Her mind drifts back to a decade ago. Young Samantha was a business genius, raking in $34 billion just by selling her startup. She found true love, got hitched, and had 2 kids. Just when she thought she had it all, her son gets hit with an incurable disease. Even with her billions and an army of global experts, she couldn't save him. Watching her son waste away nearly drove her to suicide. But the famous shrink Torabi talked her off the ledge. At a climate conference, a weather guru swear up and down that the US will be swallowed by a tsunami within a decade. It sounds nuts, but it freaks Samantha out. She can't bear the thought of losing another child. She asks the climate expert how to survive the coming doomsday.
You dig the biggest hole you can, and you get in.
His off-the-cuff, half-joking response sparks a crazy idea in Samantha's mind. She ropes in her pal, Congressman Cal, the president who was later killed, to help make it happen. They gather a bunch of military and political bigwigs, along with top experts from every field, to plan an underground city for 20,000 people. One city planner thinks Samantha's lost her marbles. A project this massive would be a stretch, even with the whole country behind it. Samantha flies the experts out to Colorado. They're blindfolded after landing. Clearly, they're about to see something top secret. There's this massive cave dug out under a mountain with thousands of excavators ready to roll. Turns out Samantha wasn't just talking big. She'd already kicked off this mind-blowing project. Helicopters are buzzing around, lowering diggers into the site. The experts are so blown away they can't even speak. This is paradise in its infancy.
Build me my city!
Samantha once asked her dying son what he thought heaven looked like.
I want it to be just like here, but with more horse rides.
So Samantha built paradise based on her son's vision. That's why you see rocking horses everywhere. Back in the present, Samantha walks into a secret meeting room. Everyone's freaking out about the president's death. These folks are probably Paradise's founders and big cheeses, the bigwigs Robinson mentioned. Samantha, their leader, decides to tell the public the president died from illness to avoid panic. Then she taps some old guy named Henry to be the new president. Meanwhile, everyone in Paradise gets an emergency ping on their wristbands. There's a town hall in 10 minutes. Henry breaks the news about the president's illness and death, then gets sworn in as the new prez. It's all going down, just like Samantha planned. But Xavier's gut feeling, honed by 15 years as an agent, tells him this woman's trouble.
Something's not right with that woman. I can feel it in my gut. Our guy is gone and she's smack in the middle of the whole thing. And I'm gonna take her down.
Wow.
Very fucking carefully.
Xavier's still puzzling over those numbers. He asks Billy if he can think of anything important that needs a 6-digit code, but Billy's clueless. Playing it safe, Xavier torches the cigarette from the president when he gets home, and those numbers are burned into his brain. Little does he know, his daughter Priestley's stumbling onto the answer. She bumps into the ex-president's son at the school library, who's pretty down about his dad's death. To thank Presley for lending an ear, he shows her this cool spot, seeing all the abandoned security checkpoints and signs. Presley flashes back to when her dad brought her and her brother into Paradise during the apocalypse. Now it's all forgotten, with the exit blocked by hundreds of jumbled up planes. The camera zooms in on a plane's number, hinting that the president's final message to Xavier might be stashed in one of these birds. The president's autopsy results are in. He was bashed with a muddy rock and put up one hell of a fight.
He was first hit on his right side while standing. The catastrophic fracture to the top of his cranium likely happened while he was on the ground.
The coroner's got some DNA from under his nails, but the test results won't be ready for a day. After 3 years without crime in paradise, the coroner's skills are a bit rusty. Robinson's still moping about losing her bedmate. Samantha's more worried about that stolen tablet and gives Robinson 2 days to crack the case, or she's out. Robinson rounds up her agents to investigate, focusing on that 90-minute surveillance blackout. Garcia says he can't recover the footage, but there's a slim chance he can figure out who turned off the cameras. Billy and Jane look a bit shifty. They're definitely hiding something.
What are we gonna do if Garcia finds out?
Take it easy. What the fuck, Brooks?
This part of the house is off limits.
Xavier and Billy are out for their usual run. They're tight. Billy's ticked that Robinson's pushed Xavier out of the investigation. He thinks Xavier should be leading the case, but Xavier's cool as a cucumber, pointing out how weird the big wigs are acting about the president's death. He warns Billy to watch his step. Xavier then visits Torabi, the shrink, asking why she signaled him to say yes during the interrogation. Instead of answering, Torabi takes him for a walk in the park. She spills that the president came to her for a session the day before he died, looking pretty rough. When Xavier presses for details, Torabi wants to trade info. She's curious about Xavier's dad, but Xavier looks resistant.
I want to know what you know about Cal. And I don't want to talk about my old life because my old life ended. The world ended, and everyone and everything in it is gone.
Torabi's psych skills are on point, and she soon gets Xavier to open up. His dad was one of America's first black pilots, proud of his job. They were close until Xavier noticed his dad's Parkinson's symptoms. Xavier pushed him to retire, but his dad was stubborn. To keep him safe, Xavier reported his dad's condition and got him forcibly retired. It wrecked their relationship, and his dad died soon after as his condition worsened. Xavier's puzzled by Torabi's interest and notices how she seems to know paradise like the back of her hand, always steering their chat to quiet spots or noisy areas at key moments. Torabi admits she helped design paradise. In return, Xavier reveals that he and the president fell out because the president wouldn't let Xavier's wife into paradise, but he keeps the reason why to himself. Meanwhile, Robinson's all smug, showing Samantha what she's dug up. Garcia's traced the fingerprints that shut off the cameras to Billy and Jane. Turns out they've been doing this for a month. Theory tries to play dumb, but Jane cracks under pressure.
We were playing Wii.
What?
Wii tennis, actually.
What the fuck is Wii tennis?
A game.
Jane confesses they've been turning off the cameras during their night shifts to goof off, playing video games, snacking, the works. They never thought anything could go wrong in super safe presidential residence. It's a dumb reason, but it makes sense. Samantha's pissed, feeling like she's been played. She threatens to fire Robinson if she doesn't find some real lead soon. At night, Xavier walks Torabi home after a nice day together. Suddenly, Torabi drops another bombshell.
Xavier, you're here because I chose you.
Everyone in paradise was handpicked, and Torabi was the one doing the picking. But choosing who lives means deciding who dies, and the faces of those she didn't choose haunt her. Xavier realizes Torabi set him up as the president's bodyguard, and she seems to have high hopes for him.
You were my wild card. If something went wrong, I needed the person who would do the right thing, no matter what.
When Xavier brings up her weird move in the interrogation room, Torabi shuts him up with a kiss. She pats him down like a security guard, confusing Xavier until she eyes his wristband. She's checking for bugs, but they can't ditch the mandatory wristbands, so they head to the bathroom, using the shower and some enchanting noises as cover.
I have a message from the president. He said if something should happen to him, I should find you. He said Billy Pace is dangerous.
Xavier's floored by what Torabi tells him. Meanwhile, Billy's outside Xavier's place, looking mean and packing heat. What's Billy, Xavier's supposed buddy, really up to? What dark secrets is Paradise hiding? Stay tuned for the next episodes to find out. The sky's too bright for a funeral, so the man taps his screen, and heavy clouds instantly roll in over the city. Due to a power glitch, street signs announce that tomorrow's sunrise is pushed back by 2 hours. Turns out, a nuclear war wiped out the world, and 25,000 lucky Americans got picked to hunker down in an underground city called Paradise. The president sent teams to check out the surface, but they never came back. So, folks just got used to life underground. But when the president gets whacked in his own home, the real bigwigs running Paradise and their shady business start coming out of the woodwork.
There's life
The air!
Before he bites the dust, President Cal secretly asks Shrink to Robbie to warn Agent Xavier that Agent Billy's bad news. Xavier can't buy that his buddy off the president, so he wants to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. But Billy's feeding him a lie about being on duty to dodge meeting up. In the records room, Xavier's floored to find Billy's got a rap sheet a mile long. How'd he make the cut for Paradise? Even fishier, most of Billy's files have been wiped clean. Clearly, the guy's got some skeletons in his closet. Xavier takes a trip down memory lane, 3 years back. When the nukes hit, he's in line with his 2 kids to get into Paradise. He's all torn up about losing his wife when Billy comes over and asks for help keeping things in order. They end up working together, watching the president's back. Billy spills that he had it rough growing up and did some stuff he's not proud of. He figures if Xavier knew, he might not want to grab a beer with him. But Xavier doesn't sweat it and even invites him over to meet the kids. Just like that, Billy becomes part of Xavier's family and they've got each other's backs. Xavier's deep dive gets cut short when Billy's girl, Jane, busts in out of nowhere. As he's putting the files back, his boss Robinson happens to see it. Paradise throws this big carnival every year to remind folks they can still party like it's topside. Billy and Jane are out on the town when Robinson crashes their date.
Your pal Xavier's on Sinatra's radar now. It's not a radar you want to be on.
Billy's gotta bail, but weirdly, Jane looks grossed out and hugs herself tight once he's gone. Xavier's there too, with his son James. When he spots Billy and Samantha having a heated chat, his radar goes off. Samantha's definitely mixed up in the president's death. Could Billy really be in on it? Xavier's in a funk, barely there for his kids' fun. He decides to confront Billy. Billy already knows that Xavier is investigating him, which makes Xavier even more suspicious of him.
Billy, did you kill him? Did you kill him?
Are you seriously asking me that right now? You.
Billy swears up and down he didn't help kill the president. When Xavier suggests Billy cozied up to him and his kids on purpose, Billy loses it.
Jesus Christ, X, you guys are the only thing in this place that matters to me. You know that.
The chat ends on a sour note, but Billy seems legit upset. Xavier buys that he's not lying, but Torabi thinks the president wouldn't call someone dangerous for no reason, and she's onto something. Billy hits the bar to drown his sorrows. When the bartender brings up his missing wife, Billy's face says it all. There's a dark story there. After folks got to Paradise, they started itching to know what was happening outside. So the president sent a team backup, including the bartender's wife, a hotshot meteorologist. The bartender only made it to Paradise on her coattails. Turns out, the reason the team never came back is that Billy put them down.
They need to know. It's not what we thought. There's life. The air. You can breathe.
He's been eating himself up over it, and the puppet master behind it all? Samantha, the brains behind Paradise. Billy can't help but ask her why they're keeping the truth about the surface under wraps. Samantha claims the outside's just barely livable, nowhere near as cushy as Paradise. If word got out that survival was possible up there, some folks would want to leave. That split people into 2 camps, maybe even kick off a war over resources. Billy doesn't give a hoot if she's telling it straight or who off the president. He just wants Xavier and his kids left alone. Clearly, Xavier's snooping has Samantha on edge.
You're giving me orders now?
Samantha gives Billy a cold reminder that he's just a killer, only good for her dirty work.
It's all you have to offer the world. It's all you've ever had to offer. It's why you were spared. One of the 25,000 people lucky enough to be spared and then protected by me. So you're gonna shut the f up.
Turns out, as a kid, Billy offed his abusive uncle and landed in juvie. Getting pushed around there made him mean and violent. After he got out, a merc outfit spotted his potential. On day 1 of training, he beat their top guy to a pulp. Eventually, Samantha scooped him up and planted him as the president's watchdog. She warns Billy she can take everything from him in a snap, and he's not the only hired gun she brought into Paradise.
You gonna send somebody for me? You better make sure it's the biggest motherfucker you got.
Billy books it to Xavier, warning him to watch his back around Samantha. She's a cold-blooded killer and probably behind the president's death. He promises to spill everything he's done and knows, but it'll have to wait till tomorrow.
Just want me Uncle Billy just one more night.
Exhausted, Billy heads home and apologizes to Jane for bailing on the carnival. She's all sweet about it, even whips up some snacks and drinks. But right after he knocks one back, his heart goes haywire and he hits the floor. Jane, cool as a cucumber, pulls on some gloves and sprinkles drugs on the table, setting it up to look like an overdose.
You told her to send the biggest motherfucker she had. I'm it, baby.
The next morning, Xavier spots the worker fixing a streetlight that was working fine last night. He gives his neighbor Carl a heads up about the area might be under surveillance. Carl owes Xavier big time and has been itching to pay him back. He works at the control tower, Paradise's nerve center, where a simple tap on a screen can change the weather. At the president's funeral, Billy's a no-show and Xavier can't reach him. Even Jane claims she's in the dark about Billy's whereabouts. Just as Xavier's about to head to Billy's place, Robinson flags him down. She sent the DNA from under the president's nails to the lab days ago, but it never arrived. Clearly, someone's covering tracks, and Samantha's the only one powerful enough to pull that off under Robinson's nose.
I'm big enough to admit that you had a point. But you and me is about as wide as my circle of trust goes right now.
But Xavier still doesn't trust her. The president was getting frisky with her before he kicked the bucket. Xavier and Jane knock on Billy's door, but it's dead silent. Sensing something's off, Xavier kicks the door in, only to find Billy's been dead for a while. Jane's Oscar-worthy performance doesn't raise any eyebrows. The case gets written off as a sleeping pill suicide and swept under the rug. Bummed out, Xavier hits the bar to drown his sorrows. Robinson tracks him down again. She spills that they found a boatload of fentanyl in Billy's system, way more than normal. They've both lost someone, Xavier his best bud, Robinson her lover, and Samantha's clearly pulling the strings. Robinson's out for blood, but Xavier points out they can't even get close to Samantha without heat.
They're weapons, and I know how to get them.
Flashback to the day before the president's assassination. Robinson's griping to the president about Paradise being gun-free, saying she feels naked without one.
You really think people this powerful would actually leave themselves defenseless?
Realizing he said too much, he changes the subject. Robinson's pissed that she's out of the loop, even as the head honcho of security. The president's old man's got dementia, always spouting nonsense. Every time he sees Billy, he calls him the sniper. The president patiently corrects him, saying Billy's there to keep him safe.
You thought they were all lost at sea, those four. And they did it right under your nose, too.
The president freezes. Those four must be the recon team he sent out. His dad seems to know something. The president racks his brain trying to figure out what his dad means. He grabs the tablet from the safe, which stores everything about Paradise. When he tries to pull up the recon team's report, he's locked out.
I've got top f***ing presidential clearance, motherfucker.
Watching his dad snooze, the president remembers when he was America's top oil tycoon. The president gave up his dream of teaching to go into politics because of his old man. He was also one of the original shareholders who set up Paradise with Samantha. The president tries to use his dad's hand to unlock the tablet. Sure enough, he has higher access. What he finds leaves him gobsmacked. The recon team found a woman alive on the surface and tried to bring her back to Paradise. Samantha wasn't having it and ordered Billy to take out the whole team.
Agent Pace, take them out.
You were always weak. That's why the sniper had to do it.
Shocked, the president jots down all this scary stuff. He burns the audio and video onto a CD for his son Jeremy. Then he sets up a meeting with the shrink, Tarabi, asking her to dig into Billy and to tag in Xavier if needed. Besides Tarabi, Xavier's the only one he trusts. Finally, he confronts Samantha, saying he knows the truth about the recon team and plans to spill the beans. Samantha warns him that if people find out there are survivors up top, they'll go looking for loved ones, exposing Paradise. The place's rich resources would attract everyone's scramble.
It's a death sentence.
That's their decision, not yours. And I'm gonna tell them the truth.
No, you're not.
I'm the president. Don't you ever f***ing tell me what I can or cannot do, you understand me?
Even though the president talks tough, he knows he's just a figurehead. Samantha's really running the show. He calls Robinson for a shoulder to cry on, but she's still sore about the morning's chat. To make peace, he spills about the secret gun stash.
The sub-basement of the arena, okay?
Sensing he might be in hot water, he scribbles some numbers on a cigarette for Xavier, but Xavier's still scratching his head over what they mean. Now that Robinson's got the location of weapons, Xavier's ready to set his plan in motion. He breaks the news about Billy to his daughter Presley and tells her to pack up and split with her little brother. Surprisingly, the missing tablet from the president's safe turns up in Presley's hands. Xavier tells Carl it's time to square up. Carl heads to the control tower and plugs in a USB drive as asked. Meanwhile, Xavier stands at his doorstep and stares down the newly fixed streetlight, silently declaring war on Samantha watching from the other end. Suddenly, a blinding red light cuts through the night, and some hair-raising words pop up in the sky. What kind of chaos is gonna hit Paradise when folks realize they've been played and there are survivors up top? Stay tuned for the next episodes to find out. The sky suddenly lights up with a striking countdown, leaving everyone craning their necks in anticipation. Panicked, the wealthy woman in charge immediately orders the sky system to be shut down. In an instant, the entire sky goes dark, plunging the city below into pitch blackness.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
As it turns out, this is an underground city called Paradise, home to 25,000 hand-picked Americans. Samantha, the mastermind behind Paradise, has been hiding the truth that humans still survive on the surface. It's only when President Cal and Agent Billy are assassinated that Xavier realizes Samantha has been pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. Determined to uncover the truth and avenge his friends, Xavier teams up with Robinson to stir up a storm within Paradise. As dawn breaks, the chilling message, "They're lying to you," still hangs in the sky. With the sky system locked down, the control tower staff are at a loss. Samantha corners Tarby, demanding to know what Xavier is up to. Tarby tries to play dumb, but Samantha lays her cards on the table.
Screw a guy in the shower and he doesn't even tell you when he's gonna topple the citywide status quo. Man, am I right?
Torby is floored. She had thoroughly checked Xavier for bugs that night, even going as far as stripping naked. What she didn't count on was Samantha planting cameras in her home. Samantha doesn't bother with explanations. She just orders Torabi to track down Xavier at the restaurant where he last used his wristband and find out what he's cooking up. Meanwhile, Robinson has snuck into the gym's basement. The president had tipped her off about a weapons stash the Paradise bigwigs had hidden there. As the special agent in charge, Robinson hasn't touched a gun since arriving in Paradise. She wastes no time clearing out the entire cache. Xavier fills Torabi in on his suspicions that Samantha is behind the deaths of the president and Billy. He paints Samantha as a ruthless dictator, keeping people underground and playing judge, jury, and executioner. Torabi isn't buying it. She's known Samantha for years and can't believe she's capable of such madness. But Xavier doesn't have time to argue. Robinson signals it's time for phase 2 of their plan, and he quickly slices off his smart wristband.
Tell your girl I'm coming for her.
Samantha discovers that not only is Xavier's family offline, but Robinson and several other Secret Service agents have ditched their wristbands too. She realizes Xavier's restaurant appearance was just a diversion to cover Robinson's mission. When Samantha sends someone to check the armory, they find it cleaned out, with nothing but Robinson's mocking note left behind. By now, Robinson has linked up with Xavier and rallied a few trusted agents. In Paradise, where guns are banned, they're now the only armed force. Xavier lays it all out for his colleagues. The president and Billy didn't die from illness or suicide as officially claimed. They were murdered, and the fat cats led by Samantha are behind it all.
Because we didn't come this far to be fed a bunch of lies. So, if you're with me, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna rip the fucking lies right from underneath them. Let's go.
As they kick off phase 2 of their plan, the sky message changes to, "Do you want to know the truth?" Samantha's getting more rattled by the minute, convinced Xavier's onto her secret. She orders a reboot of the sky system, but the staff warn they've never done that before and can't predict when it'll come back online. Torby urges caution, warning that shutting down the sky could spark panic and chaos.
The sky would go out. People would remember they are living in a cave, and then it is never the same for you again.
With no other options, Samantha orders an all-out manhunt for Xavier, while Jane receives her marching orders. Xavier doesn't know it yet, but Jane is Samantha's mole in the Secret Service. He and Robinson are heading for Paradise's exit, where Air Force One is parked. Xavier needs the flares stored in its belly. They're designed to jam missiles, packing a big bang but little punch, perfect for scaring Samantha without hurting innocent bystanders. The sky message changes again, this time with a countdown. Sinatra is Samantha's codename, and now she's really freaking out. As everyone counts down, Xavier aims the flare launcher at Samantha's tower. explosion and flames send Samantha into a full-blown panic. She frantically orders the sky shut down immediately. As paradise is plunged into darkness, emergency protocols kick in, exactly what Xavier was counting on. Samantha and the other bigwigs are whisked away to a shelter on the outskirts, all terrified of an impending attack. Xavier and his crew are lying in wait along the escape route, but the crafty Samantha smells a trap and changes course. Xavier tells the others to suppress the shelter while he goes after Samantha. The officials and rich folks bolting for the exits throws everyone into a tizzy. Just when things are looking dire, the president's son, Jeremy, shows up in the square with Xavier's daughter, Priestley. He calms the crowd and drops the bombshell that there are still survivors up on the surface. Turns out Priestley didn't hide out in the bar's basement like her dad told her to. She took the president's tablet to Jeremy. She found it in the bushes when she went to play video games with Billy the night the president died. Priestley wanted to dig through it for clues about her mom's death, so Jeremy got his grandpa to unlock it. Priestley discovered that 2 nukes had gone off in Atlanta, where her mom was right before Doomsday. She also learned what really happened to that missing expedition team. Just as Jeremy's getting into the meat of his speech, Jane tracks down Priestley and tricks her into leaving with a lie. Xavier tracks Samantha to her place, where Toraby's waiting at the door.
You tipped her off.
We built this place together. The city has to hold.
She's still on Samantha's side and hopes Xavier will hear her out. With the sky system back online, Xavier doesn't waste time and barges in. Samantha fesses up to ordering Billy's hit, but swears she had nothing to do with the president's death. Then she drops a bombshell.
Your wife is alive out there, Xavier. And if you stop all this nonsense, I can help you find her.
Xavier's not buying it, figuring everything above ground was toast in a nuclear war, and it's probably a nuclear winter up there by now. Seeing his disbelief, Samantha spills the beans about what really went down 3 years ago. It all started with a supervolcano erupting under the Antarctic ice sheet, shattering most of the ice shelves and melting them into trillions of gallons of water in the blink of an eye. This triggered a massive tsunami, racing north at 600 mph, with waves towering at a terrifying 300 feet, set to swallow up the whole globe. Meanwhile, the Russian Free Union staged a coup, and China was mobilizing troops at the border, looking to grab some land in the chaos. Long story short, the world was going to hell in a handbasket. American meteorologists had seen this mega tsunami coming, so the government had cooked up a contingency plan called Versailles. Samantha spearheaded the construction of a massive bunker under the Colorado Rockies. It was meant to house 25,000 hand-picked Americans, including big shots from the military, government, and business world. With the tsunami already hitting coastal cities and China and Russia on the brink of launching nukes, the president had no choice but to greenlight Operation Versailles. Xavier's family was on the list, but his wife was on a business trip in Atlanta. The president ordered a general to save a spot for Xavier's wife on a transport plane about to take off from the Atlanta Air Force Base, but she had to get there in 75 minutes flat. As planned, the president made a TV speech to keep the public calm and ensure the safe evacuation of the chosen few. But the thought of people dying unexplained deaths in his lies was eating him up inside. At the last second before leaving the White House, he ignored his cabinet's protest and went back on air to spill the truth about the disaster. He believed people had a right to know, so they could at least say goodbye to their loved ones.
I just want to say I love you. And, God bless you and good luck.
Panic spread like wildfire. Even inside the White House, most of the staff weren't on the list, and they swarmed the president, begging for a chance to live. His apologies only made them desperate and angry. Xavier and the other agents protecting the president came under attack. After having to shoot a staff member who tried to grab a gun, Xavier and Robinson finally got the president out of the White House. Seeing the president about to hop on a chopper, people went nuts trying to catch their last chance at survival. Gunshots rang out, and even the agent with the nuclear football got taken down. One agent, who was supposed to stay behind, pulled a gun on Xavier, trying to force his way onto the chopper.
I'm going where you're going! Ryan! What the fuck? He wasn't gonna shoot me!
Do your fucking job, agent!
At the Air Force Base, Xavier learned the harsh truth. His wife never had a shot at making it there in time. The president had known about the tsunami all along, but kept Xavier in the dark to keep Operation Versailles under wraps. Xavier blamed the president for his wife's death, and that's why their relationship went south. Air Force One had barely taken off when the military picked up nuclear explosions on the Chinese and Russian borders. Nukes were already in the air. With plenty headed for the US, it was clear that countries knew the tsunami would lead to a global resource crunch and war, so they were going all out to take down potential threats early. The military brass pushed for launching everything they had at other nuclear powers to keep the Colorado bunker from getting wiped out. The president Saturday in front of the nuclear football torn. Pressing that button meant sealing the fate of everyone left on the surface, but he had another option. The nuclear football had two keys, red to launch nukes, and blue to trigger an electromagnetic pulse array from all US satellites and ships, frying every circuit on Earth. Microwaves, satellites, even nukes in flight would all go kaput.
Unfortunately, it would also take the planet back 500 years. But that was better than the alternative, because it would give people a chance.
When the president hit the button, he was essentially hitting the off switch for the entire world. That's why Atlanta wasn't nuked. Samantha's recon team on the surface set up shortwave transmitters that are still picking up signals from other survivors, including Xavier's wife.
Once again, my name is Terry Rogers Collins. I'm here with other survivors, searching for our loved ones. If you know the whereabouts of Xavier Collins, tell him I love him.
Samantha offers a deal. If Xavier helps her find the president's killer and gets Paradise back to normal, she'll let his daughter Prisley go and help track down his wife. Turns out Samantha had already tested the DNA from President's fingernails, and it didn't match anyone in Paradise. Clearly, someone outside the Project Versailles list had snuck in.
It's the American fucking dream. What a fucking show.
The man takes a leap, crashing through the massive electric grid, but instead of an abyss below, he appears in the sky above the city. This is Paradise, an underground city with a lifelike sky that's actually a giant screen. 3 years ago, when Doomsday struck, the US president and 25,000 chosen Americans took shelter here. Just before tsunamis and nukes wiped out Earth's surface, the president used the nuclear football to input the blue key, disabling all electronic circuits worldwide. This allowed some humans on the surface to survive. After learning his wife is still alive, Xavier agrees to Samantha's deal. He tells Robinson that Samantha isn't the president's killer, but someone who snuck in from outside Paradise. To meet Samantha's demands, Xavier forces Robinson to disarm the Secret Service and release the hostage tycoons and officials.
What the fuck does she have on you?
My daughter.
With his daughter still in Samantha's custody, Xavier races to find the real killer. Back at the crime scene in the presidential mansion, he closes his eyes, trying to recall any missed clues. The bloodstained cigarette pack, with a string of numbers written on a cigarette inside, still puzzles him. Suddenly, his eyes land on a stack of music CDs near the sofa. He remembers the president brought back a CD on the night of his death, but played a different one. Sure enough, Xavier discovers an unusual CD containing the president's recorded message for his son.
I came down to the library to make you a mixtape. Bury a few national secrets while I'm here.
Xavier rushes there and notices each book has a 6-digit number. He suddenly recalls the numbers on the cigarette. He finds the corresponding book, and inside is the president's notebook. It details the survey team's encounters, the true state of the surface, and even instructions on how to leave Paradise. As Xavier reels from the shock, when he opens his eyes again, Xavier realizes the librarian knocked him out. But the familiar face reminds Xavier of the man's true identity, the assassin who once tried to kill the president on the White House lawn. Xavier remembers him vividly, having nearly died by his gun. Faced with Xavier's confused look, a painful memory surfaces in the man's mind. 12 years ago, Trent worked as an engineering manager on the Paradise Underground City project. He led workers in blasting and excavating inside the Colorado mountains. As the project progressed, workers began experiencing health issues. The culprit was arsenic sulfide, a toxic sand abundant in the mountain. Trent immediately reported this to the chief engineer, demanding they stop work. The chief engineer reassured Trent he'd handle it and gave him time off. But when Trent returned to the site days later, his access card was deactivated. The chief engineer came clean. The project couldn't be stopped or delayed.
Sorry, it wasn't my call.
Why are my guys back in the hall?
They will wear masks and will work around it.
The bigwigs behind it were untouchable, and the project was crucial for humanity's future. Over the next few years, the workers Trent once supervised died one by one at the site. Enraged, he tried exposing the truth to the media, but no one listened. Through investigation, Trent discovered the Paradise Project was secretly backed by the president and his family, so he directed all his hatred and anger toward the president. However, Fergier took the bullet meant for the president, and Trent failed to make the truth public. In prison, Trent learns that Adam, his closest worker friend, is terminally ill. He's devastated but helpless. Just when Trent thinks he'll spend the rest of his life behind bars, the Great Tsunami brings another twist to his life. As global panic spreads to the prison, inmates stage a mass riot. Before escaping, Trent grabs a police uniform from a dead officer. On the way to the Colorado mountains, the road is packed with vehicles of the elite seeking refuge. Posing as a cop, Trent questions a couple and learns they're librarians with access to the shelter. He lures them to a secluded hillside. To impersonate the librarian, Trent disguises himself based on the ID photo. Perhaps by fate, as he's leaving, he spots a woman about his age crying in her car. She's lamenting her unremarkable life, with no one caring about her even as the world ends.
You might be the only person in the world who's in the right place at the right time.
Trent, needing a woman to pose as the librarian's wife, invites her along. Together, they sneak into Paradise. Trent naturally becomes Paradise's head librarian. He plans to live quietly until the day the president comes to hide his notebook in the library. The faces of his dead co-workers flash in Trent's mind, and painful memories drive him to finish his unfinished revenge. That night, after Xavier's shift ends, Trent sneaks into the presidential mansion. He knocks out the unsuspecting president on the balcony and drags him inside. As Trent panics, the president regains consciousness and secretly writes Xavier's initial in blood on the cigarette pack. He then dies in the struggle with Trent. This is the truth Xavier has been desperately seeking. Trent grabs the president's notebook, ready to escape Paradise using its instructions.
And whatever's left of the world deserves to know.
Xavier, tied to a pillar, can only watch helplessly as Trent leaves. Luckily, Robinson arrives just in time to free him, and they immediately dash towards Paradise's exit in pursuit of Trent. They finally corner him in the maintenance channels crisscrossing above the sky system. Looking down at the bustling city below, Trent feels a bitter irony. His co-workers sacrificed their lives building this place, only for the privilege to have luxurious homes after Doomsday.
It's the American fucking dream. But there are bodies scattered in the dirt down here. People need to know this place is nothing more than a gravesite. Paradise. What a fucking joke.
Filled with resentment and grief, Trent chooses to die alongside his co-workers in the paradise they created. Xavier, armed with the answers he's found, comes to fulfill his deal with Samantha. However, when he demands she release his daughter, Samantha seems oddly flustered. It turns out Jane has somehow broken free from Samantha's control and, against orders, allegedly killed Xavier's daughter not long ago. Samantha, caught off guard by this news, is visibly nervous when facing Xavier.
God forgive me.
Realizing his daughter might be dead, Xavier, overcome with grief, suddenly draws his gun and shoots two bodyguards. Faced with a frenzied Xavier, Samantha is too terrified to speak.
What the fuck did you do?
A gunshot rings out, but it's not Xavier who pulled the trigger, it's Jane. It turns out Jane lied to Samantha. She never killed Presley. She lies she just rescued Presley and sent her home, sending Xavier rushing back in excitement. In this way, Jane covers up her undercover status and her dirty deeds. If Xavier knew she killed Billy, he'd never let her off the hook.
He was gonna blow your brains out. But you're no use to me if you're dead. Long recovery ahead of you.
Reunited with his children, Xavier decides to leave Paradise and return to the surface to find his wife. Following the president's instructions, he reaches Paradise's exit and unlocks the door to the outside world. Xavier then boards Air Force One, which has been gathering dust. Unexpectedly, he's about to fulfill his pilot father's lifelong dream as the massive iron doors slowly open. The first rays of sunlight in 3 years shine into Paradise.
I'm coming, baby.
This concludes the first season of Paradise, but it leaves several questions unanswered. Why didn't Jane kill Samantha, the only person who knows about her undercover identity? What is she planning to use Samantha for? With Samantha in a coma, how will the power dynamics shift among Paradise's leaderless upper echelons? Jeremy has revealed to the people that there are survivors on the surface. How will the government handle their desire to go out and search for loved ones? Will Jeremy take on the responsibility his father once shouldered and lead the people return to the surface?
And Jeremy, you don't like this world I built. Fix it.